for most people, they remove the plants and everything goes as they hoped. You know, that they feel great, they're looking better, their mental health
Mhm.
improves. But there are a small subset of the population that they go on the carnivore diet and they don't quite have the desired results they're after. Maybe the weight's not coming quite down, they don't have incredible amounts of energy. What do you think these people can do to resolve those issues they're having?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a workaround. You're right. Most people do gain a lot of benefits right away, and others, it takes a bit longer, and it can be very frustrating because they look at other people and say, "Wow, this guy's losing so much weight, and they're getting so much healthier in all these other sorts of ways, and it's just not getting there for me yet. I don't feel that I'm quite there yet." And some people say, "Well, maybe it just didn't work for me." Um, you have to. It's always individual. It's very individual. So you always have to ask, okay, what exactly are you eating? Sometimes they're still including stevia or monk fruit sugar or erythritol, those sorts of things, or having different sorts of things that aren't quite fully there. A lot of people think of a carnivore diet as, okay, I'll just eat more meat and slightly less plants. And it's just getting rid of everything. It's like no plants, no mushrooms, no sugar or any sweeteners, and nothing artificial. You're just eating whole meat and a lot of fat and just drinking water. And if you do that, people definitely have the best outcomes and results. And then sometimes there is an adaptation phase. Some people will adapt a bit faster. Like I felt very good very quickly and had a lot better energy within a couple of weeks and felt amazing, even in my late 30s and 40s. But some people it takes a bit longer than that. And it can take actually months to get fully keto adapted and get your energy levels back up. Another thing is that people can fixate on one issue, and that's their main issue for trying a carnivore diet. And they're looking at that, and that one's not quite going as fast and budgeting, maybe it's not budgeting at all as they would have liked and that other people have. And the problem with that is that they don't actually see all the other benefits they're getting. They sort of lose sight of that. And I've seen this actually a number of times, where like, for instance, there's one lady was really hoping to lose weight with a carnivore diet. And she said, just it didn't really work for her. It was unfortunate because she actually really liked it. She really liked the carnivore diet, made her feel really good. She had good energy and felt better and got rid of her brain fog. And, she came off her medications for her autoimmune diseases and put that into remission. And so everything was really great, but she just didn't lose weight. So I guess it just didn't work for me. And, which is unfortunate because she was having such good results with a carnivore diet and these other ways that she just, it was a shame to have to come off it and go back to eating the way she was before. And then all of her autoimmune issues came back and so on. To me, it sounded like it was actually working really well, and that she was just fixating on the weight side of things and losing sight of all the better things, of all the other benefits. And that's the classic, missing the forest for the trees. And so she was actually improving greatly. And that's why I tell people it's about health first and foremost. How do you feel? What is your health doing? How is your medications going? Is your autoimmune issue going to remission, or at least reducing its severity? These sorts of things. If that's happening, that's the main thing. And your weight will happen, but a lot of people have different sort of, we all start at a different place. And so we all have different metabolic demands. We all have different metabolic status that we're in. So people have been starving themselves and eating a whole bunch of different foods that aren't very good for them. They can actually tank their metabolism, and it can take a while. It can take months and months and months for their metabolism to heal and speed up and start working properly again, and for their hormones to normalize. And you get leptin imbalance, leptin resistance. It's very difficult to lose weight when you have leptin resistance and insulin resistance. So people can do it, but it can just take longer, especially if it's very elevated, and that can be a sign that your metabolism is severely depressed. And so that's just going to take longer for some people, and some people actually gain weight. And so if they were fixated on that, they could just be like, okay, well, I'm not doing this anymore, and losing sight of the fact that they're getting all these other benefits from it. And you have to work through this. Your people spend decades putting themselves into a position of ill health and often obesity, but you don't have to be obese to be sick. I have plenty of patients who are skinny and extremely metabolically sick. And so you take decades to get you into that position. And we think that it should just all resolve in a couple of weeks is probably not realistic. And so we can get blinded by that as well. And so it's good to remember that this is going to take time, and we took decades to get in. It's not going to take decades to get out, but it is going to take longer than a few weeks or even a few months, and possibly even a few years before you get a full resolution up to what you can. What I like to tell people is that, there's no shortcuts. You walk 10 miles into the woods, you have to walk 10 miles out. That's all there is to it. And so just, keep that in mind. Um, Focus on the positives. Look at the different things that are helping you, your energy levels, your skin, your autoimmune issues, all these other sorts of things. Look at those. Remember, it's health first, body composition distant second, weight never, because you can put on muscle and you can lose fat and you can stay the exact same weight. And so that has to do with composition. The weight on the scale doesn't tell you anything about body composition. And your body composition doesn't necessarily tell you anything about your health. It's your health that's the most important thing. Body composition will happen. And even if you don't get down to your perfect body composition, you're at least going to be as healthy as you possibly can be for the for the point that you're at. If you start this at a later point in life, you may not be able to be as healthy as if you started this earlier in your life and just did this perpetually. But you can still optimize your health for where you are and be the best in the best health and the best body composition that you can be for where you are now. But it takes time, and just be patient. Talk to people who've gone through it, get some advice, make sure you're doing it pretty strict. If you're eating anything else besides fatty meat and water, stop it. Make sure you're eating enough. Make sure you're eating enough fat. You eat fatty meat until it stops tasting good. You make sure you get enough water. Sometimes people feel a bit gross. Sometimes their electrolytes can be a bit off. You need to recognize that, and you need to correct that if you need to. I don't use salt anymore at all. I get all my electrolytes from my food. But early on, people can lose more electrolytes than they normally would, because when insulin is adjusting, you can end up losing more electrolytes than you would want to, and so you actually have to add in more electrolytes as a result of that, even more than taste good. You just have to get more electrolytes in you. So there's always a workaround. I mean, I work with people all the time on this, and any little issues that come up, there's almost always a workaround. I really haven't met anybody that we haven't been able to figure out how to optimize their health and fix their issues. And sometimes, the solution is you just have to give it more time, because it's your body is adjusting and adapting, and you just have to let it do its thing.
Hmm. I think another thing that really holds people back, and I'd love to know your thoughts on it, is dairy. A lot of people, they'll go on carnivore and they'll hear that dairy is, I mean, in most people's definition, dairy falls in the terminology of carnivore. And so they'll
Mm,
hear this and they think they have free reign on dairy.
mm,
And
yeah,
tends to have some pretty unfavorable outcomes, to put it
yeah.
nicely, for some people. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it is definitely technically carnivore.
Mm,
It's coming, from an animal. But that's not to say that things like honey are carnivore because they come from a bee, because it's not really from a bee. It's not made from a bee. It's the concentrated nectar that they swallow and then regurgitate up. So actually vomit it back up, and they sort of have it in this stored, concentrated form that they can then eat later. And bees are a very different form of life. Insects are very different than mammals are. But um, dairy is a bit of a gray area, because some people do fine on dairy and other people have a bad reaction to it. It can be quite pro-inflammatory. The casein proteins can be quite inflammatory. This is where they have A1 and A2 milk. A2 milk and A2 dairy is less inflammatory because it has A2 casein, but it's still inflammatory. It's just not as inflammatory as A1. And so again, this is compared to what? Compared to A1, yes, A2 is better. Compared to no casein at all, no, it's not good. And so we're not as good. And so it's it's one of those things that I think people have to be very careful with. Like I don't really use dairy. I mean, if I were, I would use it as a condiment. I would use it very rarely. I would use it as a condiment with meat, where I would melt some cheese onto meat, like a burger patty or something like that. I don't just you know maybe have a glass of raw milk every now and then when it's available, and with a meal or something like that. But I wouldn't just sit there just drinking a bunch of milk, and I wouldn't just eat a bunch of blocks of cheese, and I wouldn't eat just bowls of yogurt or anything like that. If you're going to use dairy, use it infrequently, and you use it as a condiment. And most people actually do a lot better without it. It can also cause a bit of compulsive eating, cause people to eat more than they would necessarily want. If you're just eating what you're designed to eat, if you're just eating meat, then your body will tell you when to stop. It just stops tasting good. And but you can keep eating dairy for some reason. You just keep eating, drinking milk, certainly because that has carbohydrates that will raise your insulin, that will block your leptin, that will cause you to overeat. And so not very good. But there are other molecules in dairy, including cheese and things like that, that can cause a bit of compulsive eating and just saying, I want more, I want more, I want more. And so I think it's a good idea to really stay away from dairy. And I totally agree with you. When you tell people it's like, yeah, you can have dairy, but, and I give that whole spiel, all they hear is like, oh, I can have dairy. And they're just eating just chunks of cheese and bowls of dairy and yogurt and just dumping down gallons of milk and things like that. And they're like, oh my God, I'm putting on weight. This is bullshit. And it's just like, okay, well, what are you eating? And it's a lot of dairy typically. And so that's a classic weight loss stall and something and a classic weight gain. Um, which is what dairy is supposed to do. It's supposed to make young animals and young mammals eat enough to put on weight because they need to grow. They need to grow quickly so that they can be safe and strong and an adult to protect themselves and defend themselves because they're very vulnerable when you're a small animal. So it's definitely not ideal. It is carnivore, it is definitely part of that, but it's not ideal. It has a lot of good nutrients, has some things that you don't want, but it's not a complete nutrition. Like you can't just live on cheese. You can live on steak. And so it's not something that you should just eat on its own, and you shouldn't eat much of it. So if you wanted to use it as a condiment, that if that helped you, especially people that have difficulty, like just can't get their head around just eating meat and that's it, then adding a bit of dairy and having that sort of thing as the adjunct, or using these different recipes that involve cream and cheeses and things like that to make chaffles and those sorts of things that helps you get along with it. That's fine, but just do understand this can cause inflammation. Anyone with autoimmune issues really should not eat any dairy. Should really just stick to just red meat and water. And if you react negatively to dairy, you should definitely not have any dairy. And everyone else, use it very sparingly, very infrequently, and only as a condiment, because it will make you gain weight, and it will make you stop losing weight, and it can make you put on fat and not feel as good as you could. And so obviously that's not what we're going for.